Let me count me down. One. Welcome back, folks, to the Get a Grip on Life podcast. On today's show, I have author Paz Ellis. It's going to be a fun one. But before we get into that, why don't we talk a little bit about podcasts? Do you want to start a podcast? You know what? I bet you a lot of people that listen to podcasts want to start podcasts. They think, I'm just going to start a podcast. The problem with starting a podcast is that after you record comes most of the work. So everybody thinks that, hey, all I got to do is record. And no, there's a lot of work post production and pre production that goes into it. Why not let Get a Grip Studios do the work for you, huh? Welcome to the show, Paz.
Thank you. Happy to be here.
So you're on a writing journey. So I see that it started in childhood with Little Women.
Yeah.
Why writing? Why did you know your destiny was to be a writer?
I I like to write. I was itty bitty. I learned to write. My older sister kept journals, so I journaled because I did what she did. Um, and my parents were really big into reading. Um, my father used to write music, and writing was just natural. And as I got older, teenager years, you kind of find yourself. I did a lot of writing. I was kind of a recluse. Instead of hanging out, I wrote. And that's kind of where I started.
Huh.
I was real young.
And um, your first book was Plantains and the Seven Plagues, or do you have anything before that?
That was my first book. I published it originally almost 4 years ago. And then now I came out with the second edition of it. I updated it, made some changes, got a better editor. And I do have a couple other books behind it that I'm also unpublished and I'm republishing again because I felt that the editing was not what it should have been. And The Plantains was my first, and it's a memoir. And it was kind of just a cathartic kind of thing that came about after my mom passed away.
What's your
So,
Go ahead.
yeah, so I mean, that's why it was my first.
And how old were you when you published that book, if you don't mind me asking?
I was 48.
48. So it's a long journey from feeling that you were going to be expressing yourself in a literary way and then to actually do it was
Mhm.
what happened in between those years? Where does it start? Where does the story begin?
Well, college happened. My dad got sick. I went back to New Jersey. I had gone to Berkeley to California to college. My dad got sick, so I went back to Jersey. Um, I was I got married. Bad, um, bad thing back then. I moved around a bit. Um, just and then I became ill. I was diagnosed with multiple sclerosis. Really, I was almost 28. So life happened. Then I met my husband now, and we had children. And I spent 20 years living in Oklahoma with him. He was from there. He's born and raised. So I dedicated myself to my kids, homeschooled my kids, and I was always writing. It was just I never put anything out there. Actually have a book that I wrote many years ago, and it's still just kind of sitting. I hand wrote it. I didn't even use like a laptop or a typewriter, and it's just kind of sitting there. Um, I don't know if I'll ever even publish it. It was just something I'd always been working on. It took about 10 years, and things happened. My mom got sick, and after that, after her passing, and I was dealing with grief. That's when the bug to write really hit me. I had to get these words out. I had to express myself. I had to deal with her passing and honor my parents, honor my culture. Um, I mean, there's a lot of comedic things in the book, but really, honoring my mother, my father, um, my dual nationalities, born and raised here, but always felt um, just a really close connection to my roots and my ancestry and family I've never even met that live in Cuba because, of course, of communism. Um, it was just the right time, and all those years in between, I guess, just brought me to this place where I am at now. Um, I don't think I would have been able to write this book or something like it and publish it 20 years ago. I don't think I had the maturity for it or just the gumption to do it. It just I had to be inspired, and losing her was really kind of like a kick in the butt. I mean, to put it bluntly.
Are both your parents Cuban?
Father was. My mother was Dominican.
Dominican. Okay. So
Mm-hmm.
when you say connected to your heritage, you're talking about
Mm-hmm.
a Caribbean, um, Spanish heritage. Is that right?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, yeah. I'm sorry.
No, no. You go.
I was just gonna say that I mean, my parents were both born in their countries and their parents, but then from there it branches off into like Spain and Portugal and, believe it or not, even Ireland, Italy, France. So I have a real kind of a mix within my family. Um, so but I, of course, I feel very entrenched in the Cuban Dominican culture because that's how I was raised, particularly the Cuban side of me, um, because my father and we lived surrounded by Cubans at where I grew up in New Jersey. Um,
And so tell me how that dovetails with your American identity, because your husband is American, your children are Americans, you're an American, but you have
yeah, of
this
course.
you have this side of you which is like a subculture that has a feel to it and emotions that you have about it. Describe to
Hmm.
me what that is.
Um, the the feelings toward like the Dominican Cuban part.
Yes, like what is it like when is it like a longing? Is it like a is it sort of a sadness that it's evaporating away? Because I think what happens to some people when they come to Canada, I'm from Canada or the United States, there's like this idea in Canada that we have a cultural mosaic or we have multiculturalism. In the States, they have more of a melting pot idea. But
Right.
however you wish to describe it, it's basically the evaporation away of your culture and the mixing into something new and how one, you know, forms their identity with respect to that. Because you see people in America, they're Cuban Americans or they're Italian Americans, right? So there's like this dual draw. And then in the person who's an American and votes in elections and lives in, New Jersey or LA or whatever, there's the culture. How does that, are you torn? Is it a sadness? What is it that is drawing you back to those roots?
Well, as a child and growing up, as till probably my teenage years, I was torn. I was torn because I talk about this in the book. I literally felt like I had to choose sometimes whether I was more Cuban or more Dominican. And my dad was suffered very much because he hadn't seen his family in 23 years after Castro's regime, and so he couldn't visit. They couldn't visit him. It was a relationship of letters, um, not even a phone call. I think there was a phone call maybe once while I was growing up. So he always had this longing and this deep love for his family. And that, of course, rubbed on. My dad even went to the Mariel boat lift to try to bring his family members. He went for 11 of them. But when he got there, they loaded the boat with prisoners and they gave him a quota of 1.5 family members. So he left empty handed. And 6 hours away, my grandparents and my cousins and my uncles were standing at the side of the road waiting for that government vehicle to pick them up that never came. So my father was devastated. He had a difficult time. And these are things that I grew up with. And then there was like my mom, Dominican, very strict upbringing. She had suffered a lot, lost 3 siblings young. And when my uncle would visit, he was very proud of his Dominican heritage. He expected me to act more Dominican or just be more, but I grew up surrounded by Cubans, and my dad's life and his suffering and everything he went through, I wore it like a badge, almost like it was stamped on my arm. Um, it was difficult, but, but at the same time, I was very proud of where I came from. For my parents, at the same time, when they got, for instance, when they did their citizenship, they were like ecstatic and so proud to be Americans. And if my uncle and my mom would sometimes get into a discussion, and my uncle would say, you know, I forgot what they were talking about one time, but he was like, you're Dominican. And she says, no, I'm not. I'm an American. So I grew up with that. My parents were very patriotic. They loved this country and all it had to offer. My father, in particular, because his family, they only ate based on whatever the quota was that they gave them for the month. They didn't have freedoms. When my uncle's children reached a certain age, like 9 or 12, someone came from the government, took them away, and said, "Okay, this one's going to be a farmer. This one's going to be a doctor. This one's going to be a school teacher." And they took them and they educated them, and then they brought them back. They basically took them away. So those were things that he suffered, and so it was sad. And at the same time, um, it was we were all really close. So when I wrote the book, I focused a lot on that, all these family connections and how all that affected. Um,
You know,
I now, no, I don't feel
I was
that.
just gonna say that whenever I speak to, so I've known lots of we call them new Canadians, so people that come here from a new country and become a citizen or whatever. And I've thought a lot about it. And the um the the thing about immigration is that Canada, United States, and Western Europe, these countries are very wealthy, and they're very, they're places to live where one can get ahead in life and enjoy freedoms and all these sorts of things. But to the immigrant, they're leaving behind the failure of their culture to support them or something. Their country couldn't fulfill them, and you see this like this sort of they're torn between leaving their place of their birth and their culture, coming to a new land, and adopting, embracing the culture, receiving some discrimination, because that just happens. Some people don't like newcomers, and they encounter discrimination, and they feel pushed back towards their own culture. But I think a lot of immigrants are dealing with the failure of their homeland to support them and why they had to leave. You think that's a fair assessment?
I do. In my father's case, he came before, like as Castro was coming in, he said, "This isn't right. I'm leaving," and he did. His family was like, "Oh no, it's going to be fine." Well, they got stuck. But he had that in his heart. However, even though he loved the United States, and my mother in particular, at one point, my uncle had said, "Well, why don't you?" After my dad passed away, he said, "Why don't you move to Dominican Republic?" And she said, "Why would I move to Dominican Republic? I'm an American. This is where I live. I could never live there again." And but at the same time, they at home we couldn't speak English. We had to speak Spanish. They didn't want us to lose that. That they wanted us to have that. And there was a lot. They had a lot of assimilation problems. They refused to assimilate to certain things in the culture. I mean, really strict upbringing. It was almost like I was raised in Dominican Republic or Cuba, in the sense that I didn't even go to my high school prom. I wasn't going to have a chaperone, so I wasn't going to go. There's a lot of things that they wouldn't let go of. They had a difficult time assimilating, and I think a lot of it is because they're trying to hang on. Like you said, there was this connection to this place that they loved and left. They had to leave, but at the same time, they don't fully let go. So they're caught between the country they left and loved and the country they love that they feel gave them life, a better life, much better life. Um, yeah,
That's
and I feel trapped.
Do your children speak Spanish?
No, they don't. They understand a lot of it,
Yeah, sure.
but they refuse to speak it. When they were little, I always spoke in Spanish to them. They always spoke back in English. But we lived in Oklahoma, and no one I knew spoke Spanish. So when they did go to school, the first few years, because then I homeschooled them, um, none of their friends spoke Spanish. So they're like, why do I have to speak that? Why do I have to speak that? It's so easy if I just speak like everybody else.
Mm.
So, I mean, that's my fail because I should have pushed it more, but I didn't. But it's difficult when no one else is speaking a language besides me at home. And they understand. I mean, they understand a lot of the words, but actually, I think my husband understands more Spanish than our boys do. But they don't speak it now as adults. Well, they're 18 and 20. They're trying to learn it on their own, but it was just impossible to get them to speak Spanish.
Mm.
You know, yeah,
There's
it's really
that's
sad.
that's that evaporation. You see, it's like an evaporation, and it
Yeah.
happens. This is what it gets mixed in. It's funny. You know, a woman like yourself living in Oklahoma, you're going to be like a little bit different. You're not going to be. There is going to be, you know, you're going to be like the Spanish lady or something like that in town. You know what I'm saying? And
Mhm.
that's an interesting dynamic for people that, you know, at one time, if you were living in Cuba, you would blend in, disappear. You'd walk the
Right.
streets and no one would notice you. But in a small farming town in Oklahoma, people probably look. They say, "Oh, there's that Spanish lady." You know, you understand what I mean? There's like you're in a
Oh,
different
absolutely.
place.
What's funny is that a lot of people in Oklahoma thought I was Persian.
You look a little
And
Persian, actually. You have a little Persian
really?
look to you. Yeah.
Well, I don't know. I just one time somebody asked me if I spoke Cuban, which I thought I had never heard that expression. I mean, there is a Cuban, there's Cuban words, there's vernaculars, and in Dominican speak a certain way too, but they're pretty similar. But when I heard that, do you speak Cuban? I was like, I speak Spanish. And I realized so many people there didn't even know what Dominican Republic was or Cuba was. Um, I mean, it was the town my husband grew up was like a college town, so University of Oklahoma there, and they didn't know their own geography, like the geography of this country and the countries that surround it. And I thought that was really funny because I always assumed everybody knew what Cuba was, and everybody knew that Cubans speak Spanish, that Haitians speak French or Creole or whatever. But no, not everybody does. So it was a little bit of a culture shock for me. It
There's
really was.
Americans that don't know that Canadians speak English. They think everyone speaks French. Americans have a very internal focus when it comes to, as much as America is the world power, its citizenship is very ignorant to what happens outside of its borders. I mean, even very close neighbors, they're not really concerned with. And there's good and bad to that. I mean, it makes America not have, if America was a global empirical force and the people of America wanted to conquer the world, that would be a problem. But they don't. They are very only concerned with what happens in America. And so it has like a push and a pull to it, but it feels awkward when you're speaking to an American and he has no idea that Haiti and Dominican Republic are on the same island, for example.
Right.
Like it,
Oh, yeah.
it's like you don't know that. I mean, that's pretty common knowledge in the world, and that one's French and one's Spanish, and you start going back, and they have very, very different histories. But I mean,
Yeah.
to know that it's the same island is pretty basic and very close to America, and most Americans would, I wouldn't say most, but a lot of Americans wouldn't know that.
Well, I mean, I don't know about in Canada, but even in the United States, I have to say, a lot of people who are college educated, who have, or business people have degrees or whatever, whatever they are that have been educated, they don't know the capitals of certain states, or they don't know who the vice president is or was, two presidents ago. And it's really sad.
Hmm.
They don't know the history, don't know the Constitution, the Bill of Rights. They don't know a lot of things that, for instance, my parents were so proud of knowing, and when they became citizens. And I think that we take for granted, I think Americans take for granted the fact that we are I don't know, a world power, and that we have there's so many other countries and so many other cultures. And I think we just kind of take for granted our history and the history of our neighbors.
That's why people take down statues, right? So only people that
You can't erase history.
what's that?
And you can't erase history.
No, like you see, like people were trying to tear down a statue. That doesn't make any sense at all. The statue can change its meaning. You understand what I mean? If you're taking down statues, you're talking about regime change. Like when Iraq fell to America, they ripped down all the statues. Right? So America is going through a real cultural identity. It's almost like America has, as a group, has bipolar disease or something. No, seriously, it's like, or two personalities or something going on, because there's you combine people that they're like Americans are like I'm kicking them now right now, so I love you guys though, love Americans, but they're almost like, you ever go to a rich family's house and sit down for dinner with them and they can't get along and they're arguing with each other at the dinner table about stupid stuff? It's like
Yes.
America is like one ignorant to the rest of the world, dysfunctional, enormously wealthy family. And they can't get along with each other over really dumb issues, things that don't even really matter if we're deciding that we're going to live free. So if we're deciding we're going to live free, what does it matter what you think about that? It doesn't matter. Why we don't even need to fight about it, right?
Right.
So, but it's interesting that this has turned into like a bit of a criticism by by two people looking at the state of our culture. I mean, I find that interesting, and that why immigrants are so happy to come to places like Canada or America, and they just feel so relieved at being here. And the people that are there are completely oblivious to that.
Yes, we take it, and we as Americans or Canadians, let's say, we take it for granted. Whereas people come to this country and they are so happy, so they feel so blessed to be here, and it is a gift, to be able to live this life. It's not something. as Americans, you know, our everyday have no clue. We are the luckiest people on the planet. We are have freedoms and rights and all that, and people don't embrace that. They're at each other's throats arguing about left, right, calling each other names, labels, and it's really sad. I actually um, received a review yesterday, and I try not to read them. I had a great one, and then followed up by one that was not so great. The person wasn't really reviewing my book. She was reviewing my generation. She's a millennial or younger. Um, she was not happy with that I, in the book, talk about my hair. Like I was a kid, I wanted straight hair, and I have very curly hair. I mean, I straightened it now, but and I refer to it in the book as having kinky hair and always wanting to have like Chinese straight hair.
Hmm.
Like American girls, like a Barbie doll or
Sure.
whatever. Well, she took issue with this and criticized that I used the word kinky, that my book was too multicultural. Well, you shouldn't have reviewed the book if you because you like certain types of subjects. If I open up a book or read the back and it's a certain subject that I don't like or that I won't get into, I'm not going to read it because I'm not going to give someone a horrible review because it's not something that I like. And we do that to ourselves. She's an example of I could tell what her what her political thing was. Of course, in the book I talk about uh, how horrible communism is and what it did to the family and things like that. And she made reference to that, like, oh, she talked about that, and it was, very biased. Well, it's my memoir, and that's
Let me cleanse my memoir of anything that may offend you.
yes. I mean, everything has to be politically correct, and I'm sorry, but my memoir wasn't meant to be politically correct. It started out because my mom passed away, and I was trying to heal, and I wanted to put their story out there, my parents,
Mm.
and in turn mine. But you can't please everybody, and I've just decided I'm not reading the reviews anymore.
Well,
It was just silly.
when I think about that cancel culture that exists with millennials and those in Gen Z or Zennials or whatever they're called, and there's something that um, the idea that one cannot express a word they use to describe their own hair, and that
Mhm.
that's going to be taken into context to imply other thought processes or beliefs that may not be there. And then, on top of that, to, um, you know, leak in somebody's talking about the hardcore realities of a communist system that generated extreme poverty and death in a country and caused many people to just want to leave at all costs and risk their lives to leave it. And somebody has a memoir about, their parents that went through this. That's not up for debate. It's not as if Paz Ellis should have to debate that, or we're going to question whether or not that's biased. That's neither biased nor unbiased. It's just the truth.
Can't be racist towards myself. I can't. And if I'm putting down my kinky curls that I straighten, that's that's my prerogative. I'm free to say that. I believe.
Absolutely.
Um, I just I don't I don't think that's up for debate, like you said. Um, and that a memoir is basically like a snapshot. It is not an autobiography like of an entire lifetime about yourself. it is a snapshot. It's a moment in time, from this time to this time. It's not your entire life.
Hmm.
And one of the criticisms was that the memoir wasn't just captured like a certain amount of time. So that's why, I don't even like read the reviews anymore. It's like, first of all, you're not a writer, you're a reader. And readers are great because they're your fans. But when you're writing a particular something so profound, like after losing your mom and things like that, you're putting yourself out there. And it was something that I had to do. One of the things she said was, this is for people who, this would appeal to people who have lost a parent or come from another country, just stuff like that. And I just thought it was so funny because I'm thinking to myself, you're 20, 22, I don't know how old you are, but one day you will lose a parent too. And it is really sad that you think that is such a flippant thing that, oh, this is not for everybody. Everybody loses somebody at one point or another. And it's really sad. It's a real it's like what we're talking about. It's real self-centered kind of feeling.
You know what? I
you know?
think I think that the battle you've had, and if I may,
Yes.
okay, the battle you've had in the length of time you went from when you first decided you wanted to be an author until becoming an author, and now listening to you deal with negative reviews, I think you're probably, especially in the memoir, exposing a lot of your own vulnerabilities. It's almost like you're giving the gift of Paz Ellis the world. This is me. This is who I am, or this is who I think I am in this time frame. This is what I've been through. And I think if, I feel that. I understand that feeling. I understand it. But I think it's also a gift that you can give back to the person that wrote that review. Because sometimes in my life, when I've encountered really difficult ideas or ideas that maybe challenged what I believed in and made me really think deeply about it, lashed out first, right? Lashed out. And back then, when I was young and I was looking for guidance and looking for leadership and trying to figure out what was what, at that time, I was reading. There was no place to comment on websites, or you couldn't get in touch with the author of the book. You could write him a letter to his publisher, I guess, or her publisher. But you're encountering their vulnerability too. And what they're saying is, and when they write that bad review is, you touched a raw nerve with me, Paz. I don't like it. You touched a raw nerve, and I'm identifying with you. And I'm identifying so much with you that I need to reach out to you and tell you this, whatever it is. And so those people that have given you negative reviews, you touch them in some way with your own vulnerability.
No, and the truth is, authors need negative reviews because it gives your work validity. Not everyone is going to give you a 5-star and rave. We're all different. We have different opinions. They might not like my style, maybe not like the subject. But in this particular, it was just like an issue with my culture, an issue with my hair. It's like a silly thing. But for the most part, when I read a review, I try not to read them now. But for the most part, I have really good reviews. But there are a couple that haven't been so great. But those things help you be a better writer. And these people sometimes reach out to me. And I had one that wasn't really good a few years back when I published the first edition. And she was right about the editor being awful. And the other thing was that she wanted more. She wanted, she felt that I should branch out, maybe have a memoir about specific characters in the book that some people have written to me, and they said, "Oh, can we see pictures?" So I started posting pictures like on Facebook, Instagram. So some of these negative reviews are a gift because they tell me, "Hey, I want more of this. Can I see more? Can I have more? So because of that, I am currently working on a couple of projects, which includes branching off and writing separate books about certain individuals. And I'm even composing a book that will be um, letters. I'm not sure the name yet. Right now, it's I just have in my head letters from Cuba or to Cuba. But I have all the letters my father wrote. My cousin is bringing it from Cuba, um, and that my cousins wrote to us, and I'm going to put it all together and put it in the book, in this one book. So because of some of the negative reviews and some of the good reviews and people writing to me and saying, "Oh, I want to see pictures. I want to know more about Francia, my mom. I want to know more about Rolando, the inventor. Like, send me a picture, something he invented." So that helps because it has really, it's kind of like just created just kind of like a tumbleweed. It just picks up speed and
Sure.
it just grows. And so yeah, I mean, I'm telling you about this one negative review, but I've had other negatives, and then I've had people like give me feedback on my website that truly have been a gift because they're giving feedback that is completely invaluable. If they just give me 5 stars and walk away, but if
Mhm.
they leave a 3 or 4 star and tell me why they didn't give it 5 and give me this fantastic idea, then I'm super grateful that they do that. So
So you must be giving, I'm going to set at risk of sounding a little bit racy here, it's the wrong word, but you're giving some sensuality and some seductiveness to these people because otherwise you wouldn't have people interested in them. Like, I'm not talking about in a raw sexual sense. I'm talking about just in like, that guy's an interesting, really interesting person. I wish I could know more about them. And, or, it's sensual. It's not in a bad way, but like you're drawing people into these people's stories. And what, you ever heard of the author Hunter S. Thompson? You know that guy? You're in Loathing in Las Vegas.
yes, yes.
Okay. So I went into a deep dive on it. I read all of his books. And then he put out a book of all of his letters called The Proud Highway. And it was all, he kept a carbon copy of every letter he ever wrote. And he had this file and he published them in a book by the decades. And you could see his writing in his letters. So if a book was written at a certain time or whatever, you could see where the inspiration for the book was coming from by reading his letters in those decades.
Right. That's
So there's something to a book of letters that might be very interesting.
Yeah, and I love the idea. And one of the reasons with the letters, my sister sent me a picture of all these letters she has, which belong. My mom saved them. The ones of my dad were sent to my dad. And so then I was talking to my cousin. She lives in Florida now. She tried to come here 9 times, and 9 times with baby, she was turned away, or something happened, or she was ripped off. Trying to come on a boat or on a sort of I don't know if you would call it a boat. Anyway, she has quite a story to tell. So I'm working on her biography because it's incredible. Um, but I also have all those letters, and these letters are the most authentic, profound things. I'm sure that some people may not like it. I mean, you appreciated the one
Hunter S.
from
Thompson.
that author from Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas, but some people will. They'll look at that, and it's real. It doesn't get any more real than that. To actually see those words and read the pain and see this emotion and these connections of people that haven't seen each other in 23 years, 30 years.
It's almost, letter writing is a lost art.
It is. It is. My son got a letter for his birthday. His birthday's in April. He turned 20. His grandmother, who's in Oklahoma, wrote him a letter because she couldn't go out to buy a card. So she wrote him a letter, sent him a birthday check. And when he got that letter, I went to his room and I said, "Hey, Jake, I didn't see Grandma's card." He says, "Oh, it wasn't a card, Mom. It was a letter." And he says, "I've never gotten a letter before." And my son's a writer as well. He's and a musician. He's brilliant. And so I'm like, "Can I see the letter?" And he took it out with such like gingerly handling it like it was fragile. And he's like, "This is the coolest thing, Mom. Now I know what you're talking about."
Mm.
So anyway, so he wrote to her, she wrote to him again, and now he's been writing to her. And he says, "I understand what you're talking about. Like actually seeing someone's handwriting instead of a text." And I'm so proud of him because he really embraced that. And people don't write letters anymore.
No.
I write. I send cards to my sisters and, fans and people that I've sent my book to. I send them a little note. I don't want to just send them a signed copy, so I write them a little note. And I just think it's so cool to get something that someone writes your name on it. They think about you and they take the time out to write. We don't do that anymore.
So
And that's
beautiful.
good. Yeah, it's
You know, it's
sad.
so I wrote a lot of letters when I was younger, and I have like boxes of my wife's letters, and she has boxes of my letters from when we were teenagers. And yeah, and like you open them up, they're just like beautiful artifacts of your romance. It's
And
powerful.
if you have children, do you have children?
I do. Or
That is something that they can hang on to forever. I mean, when you're gone and their children, and it's beautiful to have that. You're really fortunate to have that. Um, Most people don't.
they should do a course in school for kids, like in about the age of grade 5 or 6, where they have to engage with a pen pal, and every week in the class they have to like it's not like they do it on their own time. Every Friday from 2 to 3, you write your letter and you mail it. It has to be mailed from the class, and then some kid on the other side of the country could mail back. And one of the grades, 50% of your grade is just making sure your letter goes out every week. You know what I'm saying? That would be a wonderful
That
gift.
that would be great. It's a good idea to maybe start a program like that because I don't think the schools are going to do it. At least not here. Um, I don't think so. Everything's computers now.
Yeah.
Um, but I
You know
love
what's
that
hilarious?
idea.
Everything's computers and nobody even knows how to type. I see these kids and they're like,
With the wood. Yeah, yeah, yeah. It's
no one,
true.
no one ever taught them to type. Like, are you kidding me? You're going to put them on computers all day. The first thing they have to know how to do is how to type as fast as possible.
And they don't know script. Most kids don't know script
Sure.
anymore. And I mean, I kind of don't really write script. I have like a mixture, mostly like I don't know, like block letters, and my handwriting is just a little different. It's changed as it's gotten older. But we don't teach certain things anymore. At least the school systems here don't. And I think it's really sad
This,
because it's like gotten away from the tangible things, someone's handwriting to me. I have a photograph my sister sent me, and it's a large photo. It's got my mother wearing this nice lacy dress when she first came to this country, and she looks beautiful. And in the back of it, she wrote to my grandmother and some boy that liked her when she had left Dominican Republic. And it's in her handwriting. And my sister said to me the day, she's like, "Look at Mom's handwriting. That's not her handwriting." I said, "That was her handwriting." As we get older, we change, our style changes. You get sick or whatever it is, your hands just move differently. Your dexterity is not the same.
Mhm.
But having that picture with her writing on the back, um, it's actually, I was thinking of framing it with the written part showing instead of the photograph, or maybe do both. I don't know, but yeah, I just thought,
Interesting. Yeah. Interesting because the writing is more than the photo almost.
yeah. When I read it, I was like, I said to my sister just the other day, we were talking about it, and I said, Sheila, who is this girl?
Yeah.
Like, I didn't know that mom. That was before she was mom. That was when she
Yeah.
was just a young girl and had come to the country,
Sure.
and so there's this reading, you read between the lines, and I wonder what was she thinking, what was she feeling. Um, her life was so well, sort of simple, because she dealt with a lot of depression and she was suicidal. She had a lot of just issues from when she was growing up that she never really got over. But
There was darkness there.
yes, I grew up with. I always say it was like a cloud of depression over me always, because my mom was actually the night she met my dad, and I that's like my first chapter, because I talk about how they met. She wanted to commit suicide, and she didn't want to go out, and her foster sisters um, forced her out of the house and took her to like a club. It's not like a disco club. It was like, like a Latin kind of it was called Roseland ballroom in New
This is
York
in
City.
Jersey or in Dominican?
In New York City
New York
at the
City.
time.
Okay.
Yeah, and she just wanted to kill herself. And they dragged her out of the house, and that night she met my dad. And my mom always says how she saved my dad because he had been from a divorce and he was looking sad and, blah, blah, blah. But I think he saved her, him and my sister, because he had a child from a previous marriage, which is my older sister. And it was just interesting that this girl, so beautiful, in this one picture, the one I was telling you about, she just looks like she's happy. She looks like she's, like sexy, and I don't know, just this person. I had no idea who she is when I look at that picture. And then I think back to what she went through growing up, and then I think about how I grew up and my mother always being depressed. And that was heavy, very heavy. And knowing that she was suicidal, and even as I was growing up, she had some moments um, where she just couldn't deal with depression, and came close a couple of times.
Does the dark? Do you mind if
So
does her darkness have a source? Did you share it with the people in the book? What happened to your mother when she was young?
yes, I do. I did. She she lost her siblings young. They were, a couple of them were. One was in his 22. She was 22. The other one was 27. But even before that, when her parents got divorced, my grandmother was kind of like a wanderer. She just kind of left them place to place. I mean, I love my grandmother, but my grandmother was not like granny, or mom. My mom went from house to house. She took care of her own siblings when they were little. Um, she spent time with her father when his wife, and she was like, at the time, she was like the evil stepmother and didn't like my mother. She just suffered a lot. She suffered a lot. She was molested by a priest. Um, and so I think all these things, someone that believed in her faith, she was Catholic, but not later on in life because of what happened. Um, but she went through so much, and she always carried that. It was just like this sadness in her. Um, my mom always had a frown, like her lips had like a downturn, she always looked like she was mad, even if she wasn't. And the only time I didn't see that frown was the moment she passed away, because the muscles relaxed after she did her last exhale. And I looked at her, and we took a picture because we had never seen her like that.
Mm.
And it was like, for the first time in my life, well, she had no life anymore. She had just passed away. My mom had like like she was relaxed, like she was free of pain. And as horrible it was that moment when she died, um, she looked peaceful. And of course, she had passed away, so it makes sense. But there was always that darkness, that depression, that thing. And I dealt with it as a kid because, as a teenager, I was also depressed. Hey, how could you not be, when mom is always depressed? And I talk about that in my book. And I talk about a friend that committed suicide, um, my friend's mom, who I was very close to. So, yeah, there was those things are there. They were pretty painful, pretty raw, but kind of helped to get it out there, and maybe
Yeah, I
someone.
feel like there's almost like a purging or something in this too. Like you're sharing, but it's also exercising out of you in a way. Like you're letting this out.
Yeah, yeah, I believe so. I didn't intend that. What's funny is that somebody asked me that had read my book, said you didn't talk about your struggles, like your illnesses and what you've been through. And I do mention in the book that when I got diagnosed with MS, my mom came. At the time, I was living in Miami. I lived there for 3 years, and um, how she told me I was going to get better and I was going to be fine because I had been told I would never walk again. And then I was diagnosed later on with something else. And I don't talk about that in my book. In my book, I really don't talk about what I've been through. And so some people that know me said, "Ah, you could write a book about the struggles you have been through with your own health and what you've overcome, and how many times you have been not able to walk or not able to speak because your speech is slurred, or not able to write because you've lost I was paralyzed on one side or whatever it may be." But the book wasn't about me, even though I do talk about myself as a child and how my mom's death affected me, and of course my dad. It was about them. It was about love.
You're a character in the story.
Well, of course it's first person. So yeah, I talk about I go through our life, and my book is has a weird setup in the way that the chapters are, because it's not just chapter 1, 2, 3, 4. It's for instance, I have they're titled. Oh, geez. Okay, like one chapter is titled. Well, I have an introduction, but then there's Islands, which is where I talk about like the ordeal with being Dominican, Cuban, and all that kind of stuff. There's one called The Apartments, and that one is in 3 parts because we moved within the same town. I don't know how many times, in just a few years, from apartment to apartment to apartment until my parents' family finally bought a house. And there's a chapter called House. There's a chapter called Merciful, which is about my friend Mercy who committed suicide. There's another chapter called The World Without Mommy, which is when my mom died. Legacy, The Recliner, which was my dad when he was sick. And he spent 13 years on a recliner because he couldn't lay down on a bed. Another chapter is called Sidewalks, dumpsters, and the kitchen table. And I know that sounds really weird, but my dad was an inventor, and he would go around if he found something that someone threw away, radio or something interesting, he would pick it up and recreate it. He found an accordion, bellows were broken, fixed it, and he went to Chinatown, got bellows. I don't know how he knew to do these things, and he taught himself to play the accordion. That's
Hmm.
just what he was like. Um, so the book has titles. Um, they're kind of quirky. It's not your average, titles that you would have in a book. Not just chapter 1 and 2. I wanted to um, I wanted people to know that this was going to be about something peculiar. The way that I remembered my life. The one is like bodegas, which is grocery store in Spanish, and my dad, smoked, and back in the day in the 70s, I could go to the grocery store and buy him like cigarettes because
Mm.
you were allowed to do that, and so just talk about things like that, and Um, so I interject a lot of my kidness back then,
Mm.
being bullied, um, the naughty things I did when I was young, the stories my parents told me. I just told them as they told me. And yeah, I mean, I'm a character in the book, but um,
You said something earlier about your relatives in Cuba. You said that you were telling a story and you said they got stuck. And that was interesting. Those are the words you used, and I wrote it down. They got stuck, right? I think that, when you were referring to that, you're talking about the geography. They're in Cuba, you're in America, right? But I think there's a geography of the mind too. And I think people can get stuck, you know, in their minds. And while I understand that a lot of people have that depression is a mental illness, and that people can have a born proclivity to be depressed, and perhaps like people can have chemical imbalances, and that's one thing. But I think most people are depressed that have general depression. It's because something's happening to them or something happened to them and they can't get over it.
absolutely. I think that was my mother's case. I think that was her case, and with what you just said about them being stuck. Um, I meant it in the geographic sense, as far as once Castro was in power, and certain people were allowed to leave, and then they let those Peter Pan kids, which were the kids that the parents sent on airplanes, and they went to different states, few different states, so that they could get out of the communism, and the parents stayed behind.
Mhm.
Once he took over, Castro took over, and these certain people were allowed to leave. The ones that were allowed to leave were people who were really dissenters. So they hadn't already been executed. They were allowed to leave. If they'd stayed, they were going to be executed because they were people of power. They were judges at one time, or they were famous, whatever it is. They were military before, until now they're not. They're not part of this new party. So my family, my uncles, grandparents, they didn't think, they lived in the country. They lived 6 hours away from Havana, at least 6 hours on those roads that they have. Um, they were so far away from what was really happening
Mhm.
that it didn't hit them until it was too late, and then they couldn't get out. When they came to their house, Castro had already been in power like for a year, and they came to collect their guns and to take their things, and to my father's family and my dad, they had tobacco farm. Um, and they had a lot of sections, not just acres, sections of of their the tobacco. And so when they came, they were like, "Oh, this Rolando was right. Like, we should have left." My grandfather refused to give his gun up, so of course he got arrested. He was in jail. I think he was in jail for a year, I believe. And then they split up the farm into like these little, what do they call them? I'm sorry, the word just escaped me. But they basically, when they had like all these, let's say they lived on 20 acres. They left them with about three, and then all their sections were went to the state, and they were told, okay, you're not going to grow this, you're going to grow this, and all of it will go to the collective, or the country, whatever, and you're not allowed to keep any. We tell you how much you could have. So
Yeah,
they
that
were
sounds like
stuck in that
a
sense.
system like that is going to work great. That works great. Give me a break. That's so gross that the government would do that to people. Individual rights are so important. So important. Like that's a perfect example of how, like, when people don't understand the Second Amendment of the U.S. Constitution, the right to bear arms. When they don't understand that, in Canadians, we don't have that in Canada. Firearms are a privilege, not a right. So, but the United States has this Second Amendment, and they think, everybody you talk to them, they think it's so you can protect your own property. But that's not true. The Second Amendment is about the citizenry being able to fight the government with the same weapon. That's what it's about. And it's about revolution, the revolutionary spirit, that you're not going to take my freedom away from me. That's what we all fought for. And then you tell this story like that. It's such a pertinent story in these times. These things can happen, and governments can behave in a way to their people that Americans can't imagine. Like they don't realize, Americans and Canadians, they don't have any idea, and neither do I. But I know that I don't know. They don't have any idea what it's like to live in under a tyrannical government. And now we're finding out, actually, with the COVID.
I'm going to say that. That is correct. When you tell a business owner, that woman, and for instance, I'll use an example, that salon owner in Texas that was arrested. I don't know if you know who I'm talking about. She was arrested because she opened her salon a week before she was allowed to open her salon, because her employees, one in particular, was going hungry because whatever she had, she was feeding to her kids. She needed money. So she opened her salon a week early. Anyway, she got arrested. They fined her like $7,000. So the woman is not making any money, and you're fining her because she would not apologize for opening up early. It was really silly. Anyway, the governor got involved. They let her go.
Hang on a second. They told her, we're either going to fine you or you apologize?
Right. She wouldn't apologize.
Oh my God. That's the grossest thing I've ever heard in my life. Talk about tyranny. That is complete tyranny. That is like straight out of the French 1984 by George Orwell. Say the words we want you to say, or we're going to kill you. That's crazy.
Stop police. And that is happening right now. And I think a lot of people don't realize that. When you are a small business owner, and a lot of people have been affected, of course, that is all you have. And if you're a small business owner, you can't claim unemployment. Well, now they are, they've allowed unemployment for some people that are self-employed, but it is really, people aren't realizing what is going on. What I find really fascinating is you can't. Well, here a few weeks back in Florida, you couldn't even go to the beach at all. They finally opened the beaches up. But in California, about a month ago, a guy went out onto the beach. There's nobody out because they've been quarantined down in Los Angeles, really tight. And he got arrested for he was using I don't know not a surfboard, one of those smaller boards. I forgot the name of it, but by himself. So someone told on him or something, and they arrested him because he was out on the water. Now, how is he hurting anyone when he's out on the water? So it's like people don't realize what is going on. And it's really more of a governor thing. It's like a state by state. And there's certain states that are worse than others. And it's really sad because a lot of people are like, oh, you have to wear your mask. You have to do this. You have to do that. You really can't force people to do things. I don't want to get into politics, but when they put that mandate here with the healthcare, with Obamacare, where if you didn't purchase insurance, there was a mandate, a penalty. So if you couldn't afford insurance and you're let's say self-employed, you were then fined for not having insurance. And then people are still paying that mandate, that penalty, which a judge said was unconstitutional. But at the time, it was passed as law, and people got stuck paying that. I'm one of them. We're still paying it. It's I mean,
Helps. Yeah.
but anyway, it's yes, we need to be aware. People need to be aware of our rights, and what's going on right now is so important, and it's just really sad that most people aren't aware of the importance, like you said, of that Second Amendment. And I know for just personal experience, what my family went through, how big that was. And you can't protect yourself. You can't protect your family. You can't protect your land, your rights, anything. They will come and they'll take over, whoever they is.
Absolute power is so very uh, tempting. When you give these guys like some taste of undemocratic power, how fast they use it to restrict people, to try to control people, how quickly it happens. It's unbelievable.
Absolutely.
Wow.
So,
Paz Ellis, that was fun. An hour has gone by. If you can believe it.
oh, really? Well, I thank you so much for having me on your show. It was fun.
Yeah, I had a good time as well. Folks, if you listen to this, check out Paz Ellis's books. Are they on Amazon, Paz?
They're on Amazon. They're pretty much everywhere.
Pretty much everywhere?
Amazon. Sure.
And one is called Plantains and the Seven Plagues, and Just Finn. Man, I had a good time talking to her, so I'm going to recommend her books to you. But if in the meantime you want to start a podcast, you can go to getagripstudios.com. That's getagripstudios.com. Thanks for listening.